Good morning. My name is Dale Fye, and I'd like to welcome you to the Access Users Groups Eastern Time Zone meeting for 20 September on data replication with Access. And I'm calling this part one because I think there will be a follow-up as we move forward. I am the presenter, and my name is Dale Fye. I'm the owner of Developing Solutions LLC, and I'm an Microsoft Access MVP. So data replication. I took this definition off of Wikipedia. I thought it was relatively appropriate for this discussion. So replication in computing involves sharing information so as to ensure consistency between redundant resources, such as software or hardware components, or improve reliability, fault tolerance, or accessibility. But for me, the issue of replication is about being able to allow workers to work in an offline environment where they're disconnected from their networks and enterprise data sources. At the moment, I have a gas customer who has probably 15 guys who go out on a daily basis and travel through a set region, reading meters off of pumps. And historically, they've just read those meters, written it down into a little notepad, taken that notepad back to their office, transposed it into Excel, and then emailed it off to the corporate office about once a week. They wanted to reduce some of that effort, but their guys, because they're out at oil wells or gas wells, are usually outside of the range of a normal Wi-Fi network, and even in many cases outside the range of a cell phone from cell phone towers. So for them, it's important that they be able to work offline, and then when they get back to the office or get back to someplace where they can connect to the network, that they can transmit their information up to the higher headquarters and receive any other information that they need from the headquarters. So that's why I started working on this project, etc. Other reasons for using replication: some organizations just like to limit what users have access to, so they, segment their data so that users only have limited access. And the exposure to unsecured Wi-Fi networks, to me, that's important. A lot of people will take their laptops to Starbucks or Panera or wherever and sit down and connect to the internet and then connect to their corporate headquarters. And this is an issue. This is a potential issue as well. For me, I think of types of replication as in three categories: up, down, and both. Syncing. For up, I think of local remote. I think primarily. I think the concept of moving data from a local source to a distant source, to me, kind of smells like a database backup, especially at the enterprise level. But for the local computer, it's about syncing their data with what's at the headquarters, or making sure the headquarters has access to the data that they have. Down would be bringing the remote data to your local PC, and for some instances that may be you may do a full download. You may just do, in my case, I think of down more in the sense of. Have you guys been hearing me?
I've been hearing you fine.
Okay, my headphone just told me my mic was on all of a sudden, and I'm like, what the heck? I'll just have to cut the audio out of this. At any rate, so pulling data down, in this case, the down for me is pulling down mostly lookup tables, critical information that I don't want, that the local guys aren't going to be updating, so that they need to run the application. And then for the biggest issue is really synchronizing the data. That's moving local data to the remote and then bringing remote data or a subset of that data back down to the the local computer. Anybody have any questions so far? Or comments?
Sounds just fine.
So what do we need in order to replicate data? Well, first off, I have to ask this question. Have either of you ever used the replication capability that was in Access 2003?
I never did. I sometimes replicated data, but I didn't know that there was a utility to do that.
Yeah, there was a feature within Access 2003 which did data replication, and I never thought it did it very well. It was very cumbersome, and what ended up happening most often was somebody would give me a database that they had replicated and say, "Can you please get the data off of here for me?" Because it was they were cumbersome. But Access did away with that feature in 2007 and hasn't had it since then. So for me, the issue I had to dealing with this new gas company was I had to figure out a way to get the data from their local computers back onto the enterprise and allow the enterprise to update the local computers with a limited data set. So what do we need? What do we need to do that? First off, we need to have a date time last synced. You don't want to transmit more information up and down than you absolutely need to. So I just am storing the date time that I start a synchronization process in a local table, and then I use that to do in my queries for future work. Obviously, you need a connection between the local computer and the enterprise database. In my sample, I've just put both of those tables in the local Access front end. But in the sample I've got with my client, the local computer is using Access. The remote computer is using Azure. So I have to have tables for each of those. I have to have the connection between them and Azure, and then I have to have tables that are structurally identical to speak of. I need an identity column. I'm using an auto number, but you could use a GUID that's generated automatically. You need a unique index, something other than the identity column. And I'm using a combination for my gas company of the well ID and a effective date or a report date. Those two things, they will never have more than one record in the data set for a well and a date, so that works really well for me. But you could use virtually anything. And then a modified date time, which I use to I update every time they update a record in the database, so that every record identifies specifically when it was last modified, and we can use that, and we can use that with related to the last synced data in order to get the right data set. Okay, so what I want to do now, let's escape that and bring this over here, is we'll talk about the way I set this up. And here's my local table, very simple. I just used I created my primary key, my unique index on those two fields, user ID and effective date. I added just one field of data for make it easier to look at and compare information. And then I've got a modified date time stamp in the table. I've got the same information, or I should say the same structure in the remote table. I should note that on the Azure database, I also have a timestamp column, or row version, whatever you want to call it, so that that's out there as available as well. So what I want what I did was I created a form to allow us to look at the data. And okay, somebody want to turn your mic off?
Benissimo, adesso sono...
Giorgio, I'm getting feedback. Can you turn your mic off? Okay, I created a form for viewing this data, and so we could view it all at once. Okay, so you can see the data here, and I plugged in the some data columns. I plugged in some information to make it easy to tell where the data came from and what record it was on in each of those. You'll note that the primary keys in these two data sets are different, which they would probably be. You know, if you're syncing data up and down, or you've got other people entering data on the remote data set, you're going to have, you know, gaps in your data. You'll also notice that there's a record here that was dated the 3rd, and one here that's dated the 4th that aren't in each of the other tables. So my first step was to identify what records need to be synchronized, what need to be replicated. I did that with a query that just says, tell me all of the records all the specific records from the local and remote computer that need to be replicated based on the last modified date and the last sync date. So you can see all those here. If I use a crosstab to view those, it makes it a little bit easier to identify which ones, which records belong on or exist in each table, and what their primary key is in each of those tables. And it makes it easy to identify that the September 3rd is on the local computer and September 4th is on the 11th. But it really doesn't tell me any more about what direction I need to go with my synchronization on this. And to make it a little bit more difficult, if I change the last sync date to the 10th, then that query makes it look like those records, all except the one for September 6th, like they only exist on the local or remote computer. And that really doesn't give me a good indication of how I need to do the syncing on each of these records. You know, looking at these two records, I would assume that I just need to download data from the remote data source, and this one as well. And with this one, that I could just simply upload that. But if I tried to do that, I would, with at least these two, I would generate unique record violations because I've already got those two records in my local data set. So what I realized that not only did I need to do is identify the records in these two tables which have changed, but I also need to identify the records that are in their counterparts on the remote source or on the local source, which have the same unique indexes. So I created this query, which is a union query that takes the data from the local table that needs to be synced, from the remote table that needs to be synced, and then it identifies the records in the remote table that are related to the records in the local table that have to be synced. And likewise, from the local table that are related to the remote table that need to be synced. Now that is kind of complicated, but basically what it tells me is for every record that I need to sync on my local computer, you know, is it already related to something on the host, on the remote, and vice versa. And by looking at that, I can get a little bit more detailed information on where the data exists with this query, with query number 4. So again, we've got our unique index, which are those 2 fields. We now know what the primary key is on both the local and remote computers that relates to that unique index. And then we know what the earliest and latest dates are for when the data was written or last modified on those 2 computers. So you can see that although this doesn't tell you whether it's the local or the remote that was last modified on the 11th, you can see that this one has definitely changed on one of those 2 computers. Likewise, the second record, these 2 records are independent of one another. They don't exist on the other computers, so those would not be an issue. And this record, you'll note that the timestamps on it are identical. So chances are what happened with this record was it has already been synced and has not been modified since it was last synced. Probably should have used an earlier date on that one. I just realized that this morning, and I didn't want to go back and fix it, but that's what that indicates. The fact that you've got 2 records on the remote, one on each system, that have the same unique index, but would have the same modified date time indicates that those records are in sync. So the next issue becomes, just like when you've got multiple users using the same back-end database, you can have write conflicts, as is indicated by these 2 records. You have 2 different people who have the same unique indexes, but have different write dates. So something has changed with those records. To determine, to look at that, what I did was I wrote another query that identifies the records from that table, where both the left and right data sources are PKs have values, and where the date, I used a date diff here because I found that when I did a pure equals to date comparison, I included a record that I shouldn't have. That was that last one that has the same timestamp. So I went ahead and used a date difference, evaluated the date difference between those 2, and did it in the seconds, and excluded anything where the date differ, or included everything where they're greater than 0. And what that gives me, it shows me those 2 records. The 9.1 and 9.2 exist in both, and they have different modified dates, modified start dates. From there, I created a query that generates the write conflicts, and I got a little subform here that shows those. Oops, I gotta close that. Hold on a second. What happens when you're playing around with it beforehand? Okay, so write conflicts. It shows the write conflict, the source, left and right. I mean, local and remote, and the values that are associated with each, and it lets me pick which one of those I want to use. Jack, you said that you've done a little bit of replication in the past yourself. How did you handle write conflicts? Did you just let them pick which one to use?
Nope, it's whoever writes the latest wins.
Okay, so you just did a last first. You know, that was an option that I was looking at, and I said, in this particular case, I wanted to do it this way. And there's a third option that I was looking into this morning that I haven't really had a chance to play with yet, and that would involve basically allowing the user to pick which records from which fields from which record they wanted to use in the update. That's a little bit more complicated. And
when you get into doing that, then you start, when someone's making a decision and you don't want there to be any decisions, think of it this way. You have someone goes in and changes the phone number on a contact, okay? And then 10 minutes later, someone else goes in and changes it, okay? Well, if you're local and remote, you would consider that a conflict, but it actually isn't, because the last guy changing it, and I don't care if you're remote or local, he changed it to the right number. We have to make that assumption, okay? Because, I mean, if you're all running on the same network database, wouldn't that be the outcome? Is the guy making the change last? That must be the right phone number.
well, actually, I mean, if you're using Access with a common backend,
Yeah. The last guy writing it.
You actually
writing.
But actually, you get an option to you get an option when you try to save the record to either ignore the changes or accept the changes.
No, you don't. Okay, what you're talking about is two people who have the record open at the same time, and one of them saves before the other.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about the fact that in the morning, Bob goes in and sets the phone number, and then later his manager goes in and says, that's the wrong phone number, and changes it. Okay? That's your right conflict that you're actually identifying when you're remote and you're on the network. Okay? So don't think of it as two people changing it at the same time. Because time has been, you cut time away.
Time has passed, yeah.
Time has passed, so that, so whoever changes it last wins. We're done, okay? Don't think of it past that, okay? Unless you want to try to take and go clear to the minutia and try to be recording in your systems when was the last field changed and do field level replication. And you don't want to go there.
Yeah, that takes you to an entirely different realm of complexity. So yeah, so okay, I concede that that's a good point.
That's why you can do linking queries, and whoever changed the record last, that's the update that needs to occur. So it's really easy to write those queries where you're saying, hey, if this guy is newer than that, update it.
Right.
If this guy's newer than that, update that way. So the queries become very generic.
Yep.
No?
Yep, that makes sense. So
and that's the same thing with deletes, is that we don't allow deleting anymore. All we do is mark it as inactive.
Right. And that was one of the things that I have not shown in here, is that the ability to rather than delete it, mark it like you and I had talked about once before.
Yeah.
So cool. So at any rate, for this particular app, the client and I talked this through a little bit, and their comment to me was the pumper is always right. So the pumper is the one that has the local computer. It controls the local computer. So I wanted to give them an option. So basically what we're doing is identifying all of the potential conflicts and letting them review them. And then they can pick use local or remote. And I'm going to, for the two instances we have, I'm just going to pick one. For the first one, I'm going to pick use the local. And the way I've got this set up is that when I click use local, I've got this other little table up here called write conflict use, which lets me store the unique key and which source I want to use. In this case, local, and in the second case, use remote. And clicking those buttons updates that table, requeries this combo box, and selects the first item in the combo box until the combo box is empty. And at which point you're done handling write conflicts. So once you've identified and handled all your write conflicts, then it's just a matter of actually doing the updates and the appends. So the process then becomes, you can update the remote from the local computer. So I'm gonna click that one, and we'll update that. So what we should see is this record. Actually, what we should see is this record will overwrite this record because we picked this record as the local when we were dealing with write conflicts. So when we update that, and I just used the open query method here so that we can see what's being done. It's updating one record, and it did update that one record. When we update the local from the remote, we're going to see that record we selected, and now we've got that value from here is now located here, and then we got append from local to remote, which means that this record for September 3rd will get added down here. See, again, we're doing one record, and append from remote to local, and you'll see the September 4th. And now if we resort those, you'll see that the data is in sync across those two tables. Now, what I did on and I didn't get to this, and this is what's going to be covered in more detail in the next part of this, is that the challenge is that in order to accomplish this, we basically we can ignore queries 1 and 2. Those were just the initial cuts. We had queries 3 through queries 10. So we've got 8 queries in there involved just for updating this one table. And so what I did was I wrote a bunch of code, which basically would, I would just pass the code the name of the source table, the name of the primary key field, and the name of the unique fields that are in the local table, and then it would loop through all the rest of the fields. It would create the joins. It would build all of the SQL for each of these queries via code. And then I just had a record set that listed all the tables I want to sync, and it runs through that process. If it finds write conflicts, it pops up a form that looks similar to this and lets them deconflict those write conflicts. I like the idea, Jack, of adding an option for like accept local all, or accept remote all, or accept most recent all. That would definitely speed up the process, and it would give you the ability to do what you're talking about, basically, which says just accept the most recent values, or accept the local ones updates. So I might modify that a little bit, talk to the client, and see whether that makes sense to him along those lines. Anybody have any other ideas or questions or things we can talk about with regard to that? All right.
That's where trying to keep your data as in many tables as possible can help with conflicts. Not have one big table, but break it up, even though a guy may want to see it, spreadsheet view with all the columns in a row, but breaking it up in separate pieces. The more granularity, the less conflicts.
Right, because you're going to have less conflicts of changes in specific fields. a lot less frequent changes if you're only got 8 or 10 fields in a table than if you've got 50. That makes sense. Okay, well that's all I've got for the replication part of today's meeting. Does anybody have any other topics they'd like to discuss? Let's see here. I see a couple of notes over in the chat section. Use remote. Giorgio says, "Can I see the code under the use remote button?" Sure, we can do that real easily. There it is, right there, Giorgio. There's the, but it calls this, but it basically calls this this subroutine right here, which runs an update query, using the value L or R that got passed to it. It then requeries the source of the combo box, checks to see whether or not there's anything in the combo box or not. If not, then it sets the value displayed there as a null. Otherwise, it picks the first record in the list or the combo, and then it reruns the after update event, which the after update event basically sets the filter on the continuous subform or the continuous subform, so that you're only seeing the records that are associated with that selected item. Giorgio, you've got a lot of feedback, but I turned your mic back on. Have you got any other questions?
Yes. Can you talk a little bit about the TreeView 32 bits and also the other ActiveX controls that are supposed to be phased out when Access goes 64 bits?
Okay, so no other questions with regard to the replication then?
I'll have to check out the video because it's a bit busy for me today because I'm at work, so I couldn't completely follow what you were saying.
Gotcha.
It would be interesting to see the video, but yeah, I wanted to have your point of view on what is going to happen to ActiveX, like the calendar, which I use very often, and you know that in Access applications, and that's an ActiveX 32-bit component, and so I was wondering what was going to happen when Access goes 64 bits.
I've stopped using
and the TreeView also. Obviously, the TreeView is also 32 bits.
Yeah, I've stopped using the native TreeView control a while back. I haven't written anything in a while that's used use that functionality. But there's a couple of different versions of a all access TreeView that have been written. I'm trying to, let me pull up my email real quick. I've got I think I've got somebody's name down in a email that's in my to look at folder. Let's see here. Let's see. There we go. No, it's not where I thought it was. Here we go. Yeah, there's Thomas Flock. I don't know if you know him or not. I believe he's a German or Dutch developer. Has written a TreeView control that's an all access based thing. I believe it also involves a WinForm. And then there's another one. I muted your mic, Giorgio, because we were getting too much feedback. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe there's another TreeView control that has been written by somebody as well. And I'd have to go back and look and see, but both of those appear to work very well as substitutes for the ActiveX TreeView control. You might want to. I would think you could probably just do a search on TreeView control. I believe Anders has a.
Hey Dale.
Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, I just posted a link to Kevin Bell's site where he's put together an add-in that's using those controls.
Okay, yeah, is that the one that he just posted out on the MVP
Yes.
email site the other day? Yeah, I hadn't had a chance to look at that one yet, but I will.
But he's.
You say you just sent that to me?
Yeah, it's there in the chat window.
Oh, it's in the chat window. Oh, okay. All right, great. Yeah, and I think that's the one I was thinking about, the JKP one.
Right.
I do believe that's the one I used in the most recent application I wrote that used a TreeView control.
Right. Now, do keep in mind though that if you're on Office 365 now, you now have the common controls are back as both 32-bit and 64-bit. And you can have a front end and switch back and forth between Access 32-bit and 64-bit, and your app will switch with no issues.
Oh no, that's good to know. I don't currently have any clients that are using 365.
Right.
And I don't have a 365 account.
And I believe it may also work with Office 2019. That's when that version was cut, that new common control DLL came into existence. So.
And I just posted a link also to Thomas Flock's website that for his you can get to his TreeView control on that as well. When I looked at it a while back, it was a couple years ago, and he did not have English language support in it yet, so the help was all written in whatever language, and it was useless to me. And since then, I know I believe he's probably upgraded it since then. He was working on that at the time. And I just haven't had a need to use the TreeView control since then. So, Giorgio, you should be able to look at both of those two and get a working solution for anything that runs up to 2019. And according to Jack, if you got clients with 365, you don't have a problem. Hold on, hold on. Okay, Giorgio, I unmuted you. Sorry about that.
Does that include the calendar as well?
Does that include what? The calendar?
Calendar, yeah.
You'd have to ask Jack. Jack, do you know whether that? I would assume that common controls has been updated for everything, right?
It's a complete set, yes. So I would give it a try.
Yeah, I would have to open. Let's see. Are they available in Access 2016?
No.
Even if it's access from Office 365?
Well, 2016 is not Office 365. And that's probably a misconception you may have gotten under, is that everything goes into the same directory, whether it's Office 2016, Office 2019, or Office 365. And they did that for ease of switching. They are not the same code base. After 2016 was released, it was cut off, and so new features are not in 2016. Okay, same way with 2019. 2019 is not Office 365. So things like support for the new chart is not in Office 2016, but it is in Office 2019, okay? The new link table manager is not in 2016 or 2019, but is in Office 365, okay? And which is the same thing that goes.
I have the new link table manager in my Access 2016.
You have no, you don't have Microsoft's new link table manager in 2016.
Yes, I do. I'm looking at it. I do it. I use it every day. We can install Office, whatever you want to call it, on 5 PCs with the license that we have on Office 365. And when I open Access, it says Access 2016. It doesn't say Access 365.
And it has the new linked table manager?
Yeah, of course.
Don't say of course, because the guys from Microsoft have told me personally that their link table manager is only available in 365 and not available in 13, 16, or 19.
Whenever I open Access, it's Access 2016. It doesn't say Access, but I believe that we installed it it's part of our Office 365 package.
So then it really is 365.
But it's labeled, if I go into the Start menu, Windows 10, I can see the various Office applications. It says Access 2016, Excel 2016, Word 2016.
Huh.
So I'm just looking now, I'm going into the design view of forms in Access 2016. So the common control should be there.
Yeah.
Should they be there?
Let me see something. I'm gonna try and let's see if I can.
ActiveX control. Let's see, ActiveX controls.
So one thing I haven't figured out how to do here on the WebEx, as opposed to the Skype. The Skype was allow passing the presenter. Let's see if I can see it over. See if there's an option over here.
I believe you have to request control.
Control. Well, there's two different things. One is, passing control, which allows him to edit things on my screen. The other would be passing the presenter role, and that's what I'm trying to figure out.
I think across the bottom, when you pop the icons up, there's the one that says you want to present. That's what he'd have to do.
Okay. Have you seen? Do you see that anywhere, Giorgio?
Let's see.
When you put your cursor down at the bottom of the screen, you should see the icons pop up to be able to turn off your mic, turn on your video. Like that. If we're seeing.
Okay, we're looking at Giorgio's screen now, or at least, yep, I'm looking at Giorgio's screen now.
Yep.
I'm surprised though that he didn't.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to give him control. It looks like he can automatically take it. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to figure out how to prevent that in the future.
And you won't be able to see.
Okay, so Giorgio, let's go to File. And then, okay, see.
And see what that says right there? You're
that
running
says Office 365 Pro Plus.
Yeah,
Yep.
but when I go here.
This is the only screen that matters.
Okay, right. Okay.
So that's why. So you should have the common controls that you need. Now, the real question though is.
They don't work in Access 64. This is the calendar. You see.
Now, whenever you change versions like this, the first thing you have to do before you ever open a form that has a ActiveX control is.
Hold on, wait.
is you need to take and open a blank form and insert the control that you want to use, and that will set the references correctly. Okay? So even though this app has this form on it that has been working in the past, okay, on your Office 64-bit machine, you need to open that app and never open that form until you have gone onto a new form and put an ActiveX control on it. Because your problem right now is the actual settings to where the current control is not correct. And so it's still got the old path that still seems to work with 32-bit but won't work with 64-bit. Is this making any sense?
Well, it kind of syncs with me, Jack, too, because I was working the other day on a client's app that that had the OCX control installed, but when I right-clicked on it, I'm going to ask you for control here, Giorgio. I had you muted again, Giorgio, because we were getting a lot of feedback. So. Okay, so what I was going to say is what I found was that when I right-clicked on the ActiveX control, I did not have this the object properties available to me. What I had to do was do basically what you were talking about, which is come up here and bring that ActiveX, select ActiveX control again, and pick it. And in this case, the one you're talking about, Giorgio, is what, the Microsoft Calendar? No, it's which control, ActiveX control is it that you're looking for, Giorgio? Giorgio? Hello?
Okay.
There we go. I heard you now.
Can you hear me?
I can now. Yep.
Okay, so you see Control Calendario 11 there.
That one.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. Let's see what happens. It just selects the one that I've already put in.
Let's try that again then. Let's try this again. ActiveX control.
My point is again.
You need to do it on a.
Once you have taken and broken something, okay, if it's not in here correctly, you cannot fix it. The only way to get this
it's not broken. It works perfectly.
Well, you said it didn't, but you said it doesn't work, Giorgio.
No, hold it. I'm saying that I don't have Access 64 bits. I was saying that everything that I now have in Access 32, like this calendar, will probably, according to what Microsoft will not probably work in Access 64. I don't have Access 64, but Microsoft is bent on installing Access 64 by default in the next variation. So.
Okay, well, right now I can definitely guarantee you that if you're using Office 365, you can be on 64-bit or 32-bit, and it works without any problems.
Okay.
Okay. I go back and forth, and it works just fine.
When you say you go back and forth, Jack, are you talking about on different VMs or different computers?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, but the fundamental thing is that on Access 64, you're saying that this calendar will work.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Cool.
So
that's great. That's great news. I wasn't aware of that, Jack.
Yes. No, that was something, it didn't make headlines anywhere, but that is, yes, they released the 64-bit version of Common Controls.
Oh, thank you, Lord.
But again, it's only available. It's only available for the 365 channel, not for the perpetual licenses.
Right.
That's good enough.
Well, that's good news.
But if you want to take and email me a sample of your app that's just the calendar control to verify that it works, I'd be happy to open it up and take screenshots.
All right. So it's Jack_Stockton@hotmail.com.
That's right.
Okay.
Great. Well, it's that time. I'm going to close out our recording here. Actually, it looks like
I don't know if you can actually answer the initial questions that I had in my chat about your replications, because since I'm at work, I was actually only being able to check on and off on to what you were doing, so I didn't completely follow through on what you were saying. So
okay, let me browse back up through the chats then.
it was just at the start.
Okay. You asked the question of what tells you they're independent.
Yeah, that's right. And also the other one was,
one of my comments at the beginning, one of my first comments was, in order to do the replication, you need a primary key and you need a unique index that's other than the primary key in each table. So in my case, the work I'm doing is in relation to an oil and gas company. So and tables that they're going to be entering data into all have fields for a well ID and a date the data was recorded. And they're never going to have more than one record for a well ID and a date it was recorded. So that's what I'm using as my unique index. And once you get that,
the well. Okay, you're talking about a drilling company. Yes, okay.
So I have not tried it with anything other than that at this point, but you could. I'm assuming that you could use a created by and created date time field or modified date time field as your unique index. I haven't tried it with other combinations of fields for a unique index to see how efficiently it would work. But as long as you can identify a unique index, whether it's 3 or 4 fields or just one in your table, you should be able to use this technique that I'm using here.
What I
Yeah.
What I came up with for that unique field is I actually use a GUID, but I take out the extra curly brackets and dashes such that it becomes a 32-bit string. Makes it really easy. And that way, because you can always, on any system you've got front end or back end, you can generate GUIDs. And being able to convert that GUID to a string means you've always got a unique identifier.
Right, does that, and once you replicate that from the local to the remote computer, that GUID doesn't get updated, right? That's
once the GUID is created, and what we're talking about, like I say, is a second field, just like you're talking about.
Right.
But you still allow an auto number field on the table, and either database can have whatever ID it has for its primary key, but the key you're using all the time is that replicated GUID that's only created one time by whoever creates the first record.
Right. All right, I'll look at that too. That's another option as well.
But that way, the methodology works for any table, anywhere.
Yeah, I've never quite understood how you can have guarantee uniqueness, but I guess when you're talking about 32 individual values that are have got 30 different options or more for each field, you've got far more values than you could ever hope to generate, but I still haven't figured out how you guarantee uniqueness of those.
GUID is a GUID is a GUID.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay.
But okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and close down the meeting if I can figure out how to take control back from Giorgio.
Is there a recording of this? Or?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
that's fine.
So yeah, I will, and it will probably take a week or two before they get the recording published, but I will put it out and announce it when it gets available.
So who's the next speaker? What's on the agenda for next time?
I don't have I've got 2 guys who were both scheduled for next month who both asked to bow out and delay till the following month. So I'm still looking for a speaker for next month. So Jack, if there's something you want to present about, that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a little hard for me. This is 6 o'clock in the morning for me.
I was going to say the same thing. I know it's a little early out there.
In any case, if you don't have anything, I can come up with topics for next month.
Toss me some ideas, and we'll see what we can come up with, Giorgio.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought, my first thought was to continue the discussion on this replication piece.
Yeah, that's right. Especially because
talk about
I
the
will
code.
have a chance to look at the video. So.
And talk about the code I used to generate those 10 unique queries. It's really just a matter of looping through fields and building a SQL string. But it's pretty efficient the way it works. So I just thought I'd discuss that a little bit, so that you don't have to have 10 queries for each table. You only have those 10 queries, and you just rebuild those queries each time for each table you're trying to sync. So, all right, I'm going to close out the recording. I think I figured out a way to do that.
Yeah, and I will also send the file, the MDB file, the access file to Jack, so they can check out whether the calendar actually works in Access 64.
You bet. All right.
All right,
Thanks,
George.
Dale.
Thanks a lot for attending, Jack and Greg. We didn't hear much from you, Greg. Greg?
Yeah, I was being quiet, listening and learning.
Okay, just checking. All right, have a great one then.